Well, welcome to Lesson 3, Part 1. In Part 1, we'll have a look at special letters in front of words. The definite article, which is just a fancy word for the, and it uses the letter hey to say the. We'll have a look at that. And the conjunction, which is just a fancy way of saying and. And in Hebrew, the word and does not have a word, it has a letter, the vav. And in part 2, we'll have a look at prepositions. The bait for in, by, and with, kaf, as, like, according to, the lamed, which is used to say to, for, or at, and the mem, which put in front of words means from, and the letter shin that is used to say that or which. Now, the suggested exercises for Lesson 3 in Biblical Hebrew and Introductory Grammar by Paige H. Kelly, Lesson 5 and Lesson 6. And in Basics of Biblical Hebrew Grammar by Gary D. Practico and Miles V. Van Pelt, Section 2, the Basics of Hebrew Nouns and Nominals, Part 5, Definite Article and Conjunction Waw, or Vav. And Part 6, Hebrew Prepositions. So do the exercises there. Alright, let's have a look at Lesson 3, Part 1. Slide 45. Lesson 3, Special Letters in Front of Words. There are a number of letters that, when added to the start of a word, modify its meaning as follows. We have a word plus the modifying letter, and we get a modified meaning. Let's look at an example. In English, when we want to say the boys, we have a separate word, the, which we add to the word boys, that is, the boys. In Hebrew, we don't have a separate word, the. We simply have a letter that we add. That's the letter hey, seen here with a ptach underneath it. It also may have a kametz underneath it as well, or something else. But it's a letter hey. So we have our word, and we add the modifying letter hey, and we get the modified meaning. For example, the word yaladim, which can mean boys or children, yaladim, plus the letter hey, and we get the modified meaning, ha yaladim, the children or the boys, ha yaladim. So the word yalad means child or boy, and yaladim means children or boys. Yaladim, it's plural. And ha yaladim means the boys or the children. There are other letters that have other meanings, and we'll have a look at those in this lesson. In the first half of the lesson, we'll just look at these two, the hey and the vav. The hey means the, and the vav, when put in front of a letter, or in front of a word, means and. And in the second part of the lesson, we'll have a look at the bait, the lamed, the kaf, the mem, and the shin, which mean, the bait means in, or on, by, or with. The lamed means to or for. The kaf means like, or as, or according to. The mem means from, and the shin means that or which. So when we put these letters in front of the word, they change its meaning slightly. So let's have a look at some examples. Slide 46, Lesson 3, Special Letters in Front of Words, the definite article hey, or the. Here we have our word, plus the modifying letter hey, which means the, and we get the modified meaning, the something or other. For example, we take the word yard, which means hand, yud, kamitz, dalit, and we add the hey, and we get ha yard, the hand, ha yard, the hand. Let's have a look at another one. The word for land in Hebrew, eretz, aleph, resh, final tzadeh, with two seagulls underneath it, eretz, and we add the hey, ha, the, and we get ha-aretz, the land, ha-aretz. Notice how the seagull under the aleph has been lengthened from a sound to an sound, ha-aretz. Now we're not going to get into how that happens, but that's what it does. Let's have a look at the plurals. If we have the word yaladim, which means boys or children, male children, boys, and we add the hey, we get the children, ha-yaladim, the boys, the children, ha-yaladim. And if we have the word for spies, meraglim, from the root word ragel, resh gimel lamed. Ragel is foot, and spies kind of tread out on foot and look at the land. So this word spies is derived from the word for foot, ragel. Meraglim, spies. We add the hey, and we get ha-maraglim, the spies. Ha-maraglim. So here we have the letter hey being added to these words, both singular and plurals, and it changes the word from the singular indefinite to the singular definite. Definite just means it's the something or other, as opposed to a something or other that's indefinite. So hey just means the, and there are some words that have a hey in front of them that don't mean the, but we'll learn all the exceptions and so on and so forth as we go along. But you can tell from context, and most often when we have a hey in front of the word, it does mean the, or it introduces a question. That's something we'll look at in later lessons. So ha, the. Slide 47, Lesson 3, Special letters in front of words, the conjunction vav, which means and or but. When we add the letter vav in front of a letter, a word, we mean and something or other. For example, the word for servant, eved, when we add the vav, means and a servant. A servant, the eved, and a servant. If we take the word man, or a man, ish, and we add the vav, we get the ish, and a man. If we take the word for the man, ha-ish, the man, and we add a vav, we get the ha-ish, and the man, the ha-ish, and the man. We take the word for woman, isha, aleph shin hey, and we add the vav, we get the isha, and a woman. If we take the word ha-isha, the woman, and we add the vav, we get the ha-isha, and the woman, the ha-isha. So we can see the vav, when added to a word, means and if the word already had a hey in front of it, meaning the vav just means and the, or the vav plus the hey means and the, whatever the word is. So if we have the word ish and we add a hey to it, it changes from a man, an indefinite word, to a definite article, a definite word, the man. And we add the vav to it, it means and the man. The vav just means and. Slide 48, lesson 3, special letters in front of words. The conjunction vav continued, and the conjunction vav means and or but. Now, when we add the and or the vav in front of words, if those words begin with a bait, a mem, or a pay, it is spelt with a shurek. So the vav, it's still a vav, but it's got a dot in the middle there, which means it's got an u sound. So it changes from a v sound to an u sound, but it still means and. It's just in front of these three letters, bait, mem, and pay. So if we have the word for king, Malik, mem lamed final kaf, and we add a vav, we get Malik, not the Malik, but Malik. Malik. Vav with a dot in it, which is it's a shurek. So the vav is changing to a vowel sound. That's what the shurek is. It's a vowel. If you remember the vowels, that's one of them, shurek. But whether it's pronounced with a v or an u sound, it still means and when it's in front of the word. So Malik with a vav in front of it changes to Malik, just simply because that mem is because that's a mem, it's a u sound, not a v sound. Let's have a look at another example. So Malik changes to Malik, and a king. King goes to and a king. Paro, Pharaoh, Paro, or Paro, but Pharaoh. We add the vav to it, becomes Ufaro, and Pharaoh, or and Pharaoh. But it's still the U sound because it's in front of a pay. And let's have a look at it. Before a vocal shiva, it is spelled with a shurek. A vocal shiva, that's this little two dots underneath the letter. So when we put, if the word has a vocal shiva at the beginning, a vocal shiva just means these two dots under the letter. They just mean it two vertical dots like a colon, it means it just has a very short sound. Very short sound. So here we have the word for books, safarim, safarim. And when we add the vav to it, it becomes usafarim. And books, usafarim. So the vav becomes an u sound when we put it in front of the noun. When it's in front of a bait, a mem, or a pay, it becomes an u sound, a shurek. But it also becomes a shurek if it's in front of a letter that starts with a vocal shiva. So sefarim becomes usefarim. Books becomes and books. Likewise, in this example, we have a vocal shiva underneath the first letter. In this case, the letter is a shin in the word Shemuel, which is actually Samuel. Shemuel in Hebrew, Shemuel. We add the vav, and it becomes Ushemuel, Ushemuel, or Ushmuel, Ushmuel, and Samuel, and Samuel. So the vav means and when added in front of words, but if in front of the bait, the mem, or the pay, it changes from a v sound to an u sound, but it still means and. And it also changes from a v to an u sound if in front of a word beginning with a vocal shiva. That's these two vertical dots underneath the first letter of the word. The vocal shiva again has a very short sound. So this is Sefarim or Shemuel. That's got a very short sound there. So the reason they have all these funny little rules is simply that when you say things, when you run the sentences along, it's easier to say Usafarim than Visafarim. It just means the language has a nice little lilt to it. Slide 49, Lesson 3, Special Letters in Front of Words, the conjunction vav continued. The vav with short vowels and kamets. Now, short vowels are called hatuf vowels. The hatuf, like this one, patach hatuf, and this one, sigal hatuf. They're just a slightly shorter version of the sound for the patach hatuf. So it's just a slightly shorter patach. It's just a instead of a sort of thing. And so it's a much shorter sound instead of a long So before the hatuf vowels, it is spelled with the correspondingly short vowel. So if we have a vav in front of a word beginning with for example, a patach hatuf, then we spell the word with the vav in front of it with a patach. And if it's got a sigal hatuf at the front of the word, then the vav that's put in front of that has a sigal in it. So let's have a look at an example. Here we have the word anashim, which means men, anashim, and it's got a patach hatuf, and we add the vav, we get va anashim. So you see it's taken on the patach of the patach hatuf under the first letter. Now, you don't need to memorize this. This is just for your own enlightenment, just to show you some of the processes unless you're actually spelling out words, and you don't need to know things to this level, but it's good as a backgrounder just to understand how these vowels change, and there are all these different rules concerning them, but you don't have to memorize this. Just be aware that it's there and know where to look if you want to uh, read up or revise. So anashim with the vav becomes va anashim, and men, and the the patach from the patach hatuf under the first letter is taken and put under the vav. Another example, the word for truth, emet, aleph mem tav. The aleph has a seagull hatif under it. We add the vav, and we get ve emet. So it's taken the seagull from the seagull hatif under the first letter, and it becomes and truth, ve emet, ve emet. Now, before monosyllabic words, before some monosyllabic words or words with initial accent, it may be spelled with a kametz. So the word zon, we add a vav to it. It becomes va-zon, va-zon. Zon means sheep, and va-zon means and sheep. Also the word lechem, which means bread, we add the vav to it, and we get va-lechem, va-lechem, and bread, and bread. So again, you don't need to memorize this, just be aware that sometimes the vav can have two dots under it, the short S sound. Sometimes it can have the patach or the kametz under it, and there are a number of different rules that govern what sound is under the vav. But whenever you have a vav in front of a word, it almost always means and it can have an oo sound as well. Slide 50, lesson 3, special letters in front of words, the conjunction vav, summary. So to summarize, we have the vav in front of a word, it means and there's a number of different vowels associated with it, depending on what sort of words it is in front of, and the vowels in the first letter of that word. For example, if we put it in front of the word ha'ish, we just have the vav with the vocal shiva under it, two dots here. So it's just v'ha'ish. But if it's in front of a word beginning with the letters bait or bet, mem, or pay or fay, then it changes from a v sound to an u sound, a shurek. So it becomes u malik, for example, if it's in front of the word malik, because the malik begins with a mem. And it also can have an oo sound when in front of a word beginning with a vocal shiva. For example, this word sefarim, books, becomes sefarim, and books, sefarim. Before hatif vowels, that's vowels with the two dots and the kametz or the seagull, etc. in front, it takes on the vowel sound, the lengthened vowel sound. So anashim becomes va anashim. And before monosyllabic words, like the word zon, it's just one syllable, you put the vav in front and it takes on a kametz, and it's just a long ah sound, so it becomes a vadzon. Vadzon. So those are the rules regarding the vav, but just be aware that if you've got a vav in front of a word, it just means and. And the Hebrew scriptures have already got all the dots and dashes in it, so you don't need to worry about whether it has a how to put these words together. You just have to know how to read them. You just have to be able to read Malak and know that it means and aking, and it's an u sound as opposed to a vav. So now you know that the sounds change depending on what sort of words they're in front of, but it all means and sometimes it's translated but. Well done. It's time to have a cool, refreshing break. You deserve it. Lesson 3 will continue after the break, and we'll look at prepositions and other letters that are in front of words. But for now, put your feet up, relax, and unwind. Okay, Lesson 3, Part 2. In Part 1, we had a look at special letters in front of words, the definite article, and the conjunction. And in Part 2, we'll have a look at prepositions. Bait, which is used in front of a word to say in, by, or with. Kaf, when put in front of a word, means as, like, or according to. And the lamed, when put in front of a word, means to, for, or at. And the mem, which means from. And the shin, when it's in front of a word, means that or which. Now the suggested exercises for Lesson 3 are in Biblical Hebrew and Introductory Grammar by Paige H. Kelly, Lesson 5 and Lesson 6. And in Basics of Biblical Hebrew Grammar by Gary D. Practico and Miles V. Van Pelt, Section 2, The Basics of Hebrew Nouns and Nominals, Part 5, The Definite Article and Conjunction Waw, or Conjunction Vav, and Part 6, Hebrew Prepositions, and the exercises there. Alright, let's have a look at Lesson 3, Part 2. Slide 54, Lesson 3, Special letters in front of words. The preposition bet, which means in, on, by, or with. If we take the word sardeh, which means field, a field, sardeh, sin, dalet, hay, and we add the bet, we get besadeh, besadeh, or besadeh, which means in a field, in a field. If we take the word for truth, emet, aleph mem tav, and we add the bet, we have be'emet, be'emet, which means in truth, in truth. And this is a very common expression in modern Hebrew. It's like saying truly. If you say, you know, I saw Elvis, or I met the Messiah, they would say be'emet, and truly, you know. So be'emet, a very common word in modern Hebrew, and it literally means in truth. If we take the word for temple, hayachal, and we add the bet, we get bahayachal, bahayachal, in a temple, in a temple. Now, if the word has the definite article, that is hay in front of the word, and we want to add a bait in front of that to say in the whatever the word is, then the hay gets absorbed. For example, as we saw above, the word for temple is hayachal. If we have the word ha-hayachal, that actually means the temple. The temple. Ha-hayachal. And if we want to say in the temple, we put the bet in front of it. And we get bahayachal. Bahayachal. But the hay has been absorbed, if you like. But the bet now has a patach under it. It has a long ah sound instead of a short eh sound from the vocal shiva that it normally would have. That's because the hay has got absorbed. Just think of it as you would naturally say it. You would say ba-ha-hayachal. And if you say it quickly enough, it's kind of ba-hayachal. The hay gets absorbed into the bet. So there we go. Ba-hayachal. That means in the temple. In the temple. So we see that bet means in or on or by or with when added to the front of a word. And when added to a word with a hay, meaning the hay gets absorbed into the bet with the vocal shiva, and the vocal shiva is dropped and the patach is adopted, for example. So hayachal, ha-hayachal becomes ba-hayachal, in the temple. So that's bet. Slide 55, Lesson 3, Special letters in front of words. The preposition lamed, which means to or for. If we take the word for youth, na'ah, nun, ayin, resh, and we add the lamed, we get le-na'ah, for a young man. So na'ah, a youth or young man, becomes le-na'ah, for a young man. It could also mean to a young man. Of course, it just depends on context in the verse, how you want to say it. If we take the word for covenant, berit, and we add the lamed, we get leverit, 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 for a covenant, leverit. If we take the word emor, to say, and we put the lamed in front of it, we get lemor, which actually means to say or saying. And that's a very common term you find in the Torah. Vayomer Yahweh el Moshe. And Yahweh said to Moses, or he said to Moses saying, lemor. Now, if we have a word with the definite article, the in front of it, or the hay in front of it, and we add the lamed, then just like in the previous example, the hay gets absorbed by the lamed. So let's just look at a word without the hay, the word ish, or man, or a man, and we add the lamed, we get leish, leish, to or for a man. Okay, but if we take a word for the man, ha'ish, ha'ish, the man, and we add the lamed, the hay gets absorbed and the kametz is put under the lamed from the hay, and so we get laish, laish. So it's spelt the same as the one above, but the vowel is different, and so it means the man. So it's two or four, the man. Now, you can tell by context. You may not remember all of these rules, but when you're actually reading in context, you'll tell whether it's a to the man or a man. But this is just a further clue. The lamed, the vocal sheave under the lamed is lengthened to account for the long ah sound of the hay, meaning the. So it's not la-ish, it's la-ish. To the man, or for the man. So that's lamed, the preposition lamed, meaning to or for when put in front of a word. Slide 56. Special letters in front of words. The preposition kaf, which means like, or as, or according to. We take the word Malik, meaning a king, and we add the kaf to it, k-Malik, k-Malik, the hirik underneath it, meaning like a king, like a king. Another example, if we take the word for a covenant, berit, berit, a covenant, and we add the kaf to the front of it, we have the word kibrit or kibrit, like a covenant, like a covenant. Can be also as a covenant, or as a king, or according to a king, and so forth. And just as in the other examples, if we add the definite article the letter hey, with the patach under it in this example, the hey gets absorbed when we add the kaf, and the kaf takes on the patach of the hey. So ha-Malik, the king, ha-Malik, the king, becomes ka-Malik, ka-Malik. Notice the patach under the kaf, unlike over here where it just had a hirik. Now the kaf has taken on the long vowel sound of the hey, meaning the, and we get ka-Malik, like the king, or as the king, or according to the king. Another example, habarit, habarit, the covenant. When we add the kaf to the front, we get kabarit, kabarit. Not carburetor, no, but kabarit, like the covenant, or as the covenant, or according to the covenant, depending on the context, how you want to translate it. But that's what the kaf does and means and behaves when we add it to the front of a noun. It means like, or as, or according to. Slide 57, Lesson 3, Special letters in front of words. The preposition min, or me, which means from. The preposition min, mem, nun, occurs both as a makef preposition. A makef is this short horizontal line, we'll talk about that in a second, and as an inseparable preposition. m, just the letter mem, inseparable. It's actually joined to the word, just like the other examples. Now a little bit about the makef. The makef, this short horizontal line, is just very similar to a hyphen in English and used to join two words together. For example, the term House of Israel, Beit Yisrael, has a makef often between the word Beit, meaning house, and the word Yisrael, Israel, implying of or ownership. So it's the house belonging to Israel or House of Israel, Beit Yisrael. So that's what the makef can mean. And here the makef is just used to join the preposition min, meaning from, to the actual word. And we can also write it another way by just putting the letter mem straight in front of the word, just like in the other examples. So let's have a look at some examples. Firstly, the makef preposition, min Malak, min Malak. Malak meaning a king, and min meaning from a king. Now we can say the same thing in a shortened version using the inseparable preposition, just a fancy way of just saying the preposition is joined to the actual word. It's inseparable, it's joined to it. So instead of min Malak, we have m Malak, which means the same thing, from a king. So we can have min Malak, or we can have m Malak. And let's see some more examples. Min Bait, from a house, min Bait. Or we can write that simply as mabait, mabait, from a house. So they both mean the same thing. Or min ish, from a man. And we can write that differently. We just put the inseparable preposition mem in front or on the word, and it becomes ma'ish, meaning the same thing, from a man. Or the word min haaretz, from the land, min haaretz, and we add the inseparable preposition mem to the word haaretz, and we have mehaaretz, from the land. And the word aretz can also mean earth. In the beginning Yahweh created the heavens and the earth. So that's the preposition min, or me, meaning from. Slide 58, Lesson 3, Special letters in front of words. Shin, meaning that, or which, or because. If we take the word ani, meaning I, and we put the shin in front of it, it becomes sha'ani, and it can mean because I, because I. If we take the word yomar, meaning he will say, and we put the shin in front, we have the word sheyomar, which means that which, or that, or which he will say. If we have the word yavol, and we put the shin in front of it, shayavol, yavol means he will come, and shayavol means that which he cometh. Now these, that or which he cometh, these are all from the Bible, these examples. So shin, when put in front of a word, means that, or which, or because, depending on the context of the verse. So that's the letter shin. That's the last of our letters in front of words. Slide 59, Lesson 3, Special letters in front of words, example texts. Now I'm going to show you a whole lot of example texts with these special letters in front of words appearing everywhere, just to show you how often they do appear, and they do appear often. So we'll have a look at texts that use the hey and the vav and the bet, the and the in, if you like. The first one is from the first chapter and the first verse of the Bible in Genesis or Bereshit. And the very word Bereshit means in the first, or in the head, or in the chief, or in the beginning. Bereshit, or Bereshit. So the Be means in, and Reshit means first. Of course, all of these words you won't necessarily know. That's not important. The important thing is to see how often these letters appear in the sentences. So the first sentence is Bereshit bara, in the first, bara, created, Elohim, God, et ha-shemayim, the heavens, ha-shemayim, ve'et ha'aretz, and, here's the vav, et ha'aretz. We'll talk about the et, the aleph tav, in a later lesson. So here we have the vav appearing once, the hey appearing twice. The hey means the vav means and the bait appears once. This bait here is part of the word bara, and as we saw in the first lesson, Hebrew words are usually made up of 3 root letters, and there are various other letters that can be added to the front or end of the word. Here we have the plural endings, the im. So Elohim can mean God, but it can also mean gods. So that gives plenty of heretics excuses for saying all sorts of things, but certainly there is a plurality to Yahweh. His son comes from him, and all the angels are called Ben Elohim, but there's only one Father, So anyway, Bereshit bara Elohim et ha-shemayim ve'et ha'aretz. In the beginning, created Elohim, God, et ha-shemayim, the heavens, shemayim, the heavens, ve'et ha'aretz, and the earth, ha'aretz, the earth. The second example, from 25 verses later, in Genesis 1:26, Vayomer, and he said, Vayomer, Elohim, and God said, and he said God, and God said, Na'aseh Adam, let us make man, b'tzelmenu, in our image. So here we have the letter bait, in, b'tzelmenu, in our image, kadimotenu, as our likeness, dimotenu. Again, you don't need to remember all these words, but you'll become familiar with a lot of words that appear often in the text. You'll come across Elohim all the time, God. V'yardu, and let them have dominion, b'dagat, on the dagat, the fish, hayam, of the sea, hayam, uv, off, and on, here's the u, the vav, meaning and here's the bait, meaning on, and here's the actual noun, the off, the birds, uva off, and on the birds, ha-shemayim, of the heavens, the heavens. There's no word for of that's usually used in biblical Hebrew. We can use the word shall in modern Hebrew, and that can be used in biblical Hebrew, but most of the time the word for of is just implied. So, and on the birds of the heavens, ha shemayim, and on the beasts, uva behema, and on the beasts, behema, uv kol, and on all, uv kol haaretz, the earth, haaretz, uv kol, and on all, uv kol, and on all. Ha-rames, ha-rames, that creeps, the creeps, that's quite funny, the creeping things, that creep, ha-rames, el haaretz, upon the earth, haaretz. Let's have a look at some more. We have the lamed, which means to or for. We have kaf, which means like, as, or according to. We have the mem, meaning from, and the shin, meaning that or which. So let's look at the next example. V'ya'as Elohim, v'ya'as, and, so here's the vav, and, ya'as, he made, Elohim, God, et harakia, the firmament, harakia, the firmament, v'yavdil, and he separated, ba'in hamayim, ba'in hamayim, the waters, asher, which, mitachat, from under, larakia, to the expanse or firmament, uvain, and between, uvain, and between, hamayim, the waters, hamayim, asher, which is from above, ma'al, from above, al, larakia, to or for the firmament, larakia, vaihi, kin, and it was so. Again, you don't need to know all these words, but you'll come across some of these quite often. Ma'im is a very common one. Asher, very common. Most of these words are quite common. But the main thing to note is how often these letters appear. See? So what we've learnt today is something you'll use all the time. Let's have a look at another example. The final example. This is from the Song of Songs. Previous one was from Genesis 1:7. This is Song of Songs. K'ma'at, as or like, a little, sha'avati mahim, ad shamatzati et sha'ahava nafshi. A little when I passed over, that I passed over from them, mahim, until ad shamatzati, that I found, matzah means found, and matzati I found, et sha'ahava, that loves, nafshi, my soul. Achazatayev, I took hold of him, velo, and not arpenu, and I would not let him go, would not weaken my grip. Ad sha'ahavayatev, until that I'd caused to bring him el bait, to the house, or the house of my mother in me, va'el chadir chorati, and to the chamber of my parents, or the ones that bore me. So here we have the letter shin being used to mean that. Sha'avati, that passed over. Shamatzati, that I found, or which I found. Shamatzati. And sha'ahava, that or which loves, that or or that loves, or which loves, nafshi, my soul. Okay, so we can see here that the letter vav is used all the time. Of course it would be, it's the and. The letter bait is used very often, and the letter hey, of course, for the. So Hebrew is very much a compact language, and instead of having a separate word, we just have a letter, and instead of having it as a separate letter, we just attach it to the word. So these are some of the prepositions and letters that we put in front of words to make the sentences run along. And that's it for this lesson. Okay, well, you've hopefully just completed lesson 3. And in part 1, we had a look at special letters in front of words, the definite article, the, and the conjunction, and. And we've had a look at prepositions in part 2, the bait, the kaf, the lamed, the mem, and the shin, which means that or which. And the suggested exercises, if you haven't already done them, Biblical Hebrew and Introductory Grammar by Paige H. Kelly, Lesson 5 and Lesson 6, and Basics of Biblical Hebrew Grammar by Gary D. Practico and Miles V. Van Pelt. In Section 2, the Basics of Hebrew Nouns and Nominals, do Section 5, or Part 5, the definite article and the conjunction waw, or vav, and Part 6, the Hebrew prepositions. All right, well done.